So, Joe, in our last episode, we talked about our experience at Inbound. And obviously, a big topic for this year was AI, as is the topic for most things this year, not just at that conference. But I think the biggest fear that people have is that AI is here to take their jobs. And I would say it's not here to take your jobs, it's here to take your tasks. And the only reason you would lose your job, I think, is if you would lose it out to somebody that is using AI for their tasks that has the same position as you and you are not. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think if we're talking about solopreneurs, yes. If we're talking about in general, the news out today, we're on the 29th of October, 2025, and major companies are laying off tens of thousands of white-collar employees because they're basically being pressured by investors and the C-suite's just saying, we're going to replace these people with AI. I don't predict that's going to go well. I suspect that they're going to be a little surprised as to how that doesn't kind of live up to their expectations. Eventually it will, because AI is getting better all the time. But yes, I think as a solopreneur where you're in charge of your own destiny, you don't have to lose your job because AI starts doing something that you do. So I'll go there.
And for solopreneurs' sake, we think you should be looking at AI as your teammate. I kind of think of it, AI is kind of like an overenthusiastic intern. Like they're fast, they're eager, but they are wrong, sometimes clueless. AI is not perfect. And so I see it as look how good I can do, but that training still needs to be there. So I want to talk about like AI as your teammate, especially as a solopreneur, and how you can kind of coach that teammate today and help you understand how to manage AI, not be managed by AI. Does that seem like a good direction?
It does. I want to start with just kind of some framing, which is, and I'm guilty of this as much as anybody, is that we like to think that AI thinks, but it's not thinking. It really isn't. It just feels that way. It predicts, right? Somebody described it as a plausibility engine, which I thought was a brilliant way to describe it, right? It's predicting what the next word should be based on the inputs. And it's surprisingly good, given that that's what it's doing. You kind of think about it, it's doing that, and you go, wow, it's pretty darn good. But it is by no means, as you said, perfect or even close to perfect, and can really go off the rails. And if you want to know just how weird it can get, I have a GPT I created called You're Wrong. And You're Wrong basically has a bunch of prompts to basically think more critically and to be less nice about critiquing. And so I'll put something in and it'll kind of rip me apart. It really roasts me. And sometimes I'll take ChatGPT generated material and put it into You're Wrong, which is also ChatGPT, and it will roast it. And so you just kind of look and go, okay. And the thing with You're Wrong is it's actually better than ChatGPT at coming up with good ideas. It's much more critical of its own thinking. But anyway, the point being, you do not want to treat this as anything other than a highly eager, coachable, but pretty naive intern.
And I'm so glad you said coachable, because I think a common misconception that people have is that the AI knows their business. Like if you typed your website in, that it would automatically know the ins and outs, and it just doesn't. Like you really have to take time to train AI so that it works the best for you. So you can't just say, let's say you're writing a social media post for your company, and it's like, write a social post for Livestar. But it wouldn't really know what to do. So you have to say, write a social post for Livestar that targets solopreneurs and helps them with their productivity. Like you need to train it. And granted, over time, it'll start picking up on it. But if you want to start getting it right immediately, you need to put in that effort, just like you were training another employee, another contractor, whatever. It needs that training. And even that onboarding. We talked about onboarding.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. But one of the problems that I've seen, I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, is that I will train up a GPT, not necessarily, doing anything, under the hood, so to speak, but just kind of going and give a bunch of instructions And over time, if I'm using this thing for a lot of work and using the same feed, it'll start to forget. And it's got to do with something called the context window that can only hold so much information. And so you start off with some initial instructions. You get deep down into it, it starts to forget the initial instructions. So you need to, if you really want to use it and train it up, you've got to go in and create a GPT and put in a bunch of training materials so that it doesn't ever lose that. Does that make sense?
It does. And I mean, even like if you have a business plan, if you have a brand guidelines document, those are the kinds of things you should be inputting and retraining. And don't rely on it to always, like you were saying, to always remember, like maybe have like a Monday morning meeting with ChatGPT and be like, hey, just a reminder, this is my business plan. Let's focus on this for the rest of the week as we're putting together the content and all of that.
Well, like I said, you should create a GPT for that, right? So that the business plan is in there in the core training, as opposed to just trying to make it remember in the base chat GPT.
Yep.
Right. You don't want to do that because it won't.
Yeah. But you kind of have to look at it. I kind of look at AI as like an executor, a brainstormer, and a researcher, whereas you are the visionary, the decision maker, the editor. And that's kind of like how I define the two different roles. Again, kind of with that intern mindset and framework. But Joe, I mean, if people are treating it like an employee, because I mean, AI really is a game changer for solopreneurs. It frees up so much time. What would you say you should delegate and what should you not delegate?
Well, I mean, at the core of it, do not delegate your thinking, right? Don't ask AI to, I mean, just as an example, write a blog post about the 3 biggest mistakes that solopreneurs make without telling it what those 3 mistakes are. Don't let AI think through. I mean, if you want to go in and brainstorm and say, throw out, the biggest mistakes that you think solopreneurs make based on a search of the web, and then go through those and go, oh, wow, yeah, I didn't think of that one, and there's this one, and then take that. But you need to feed it your thinking, right? And it's nice to feed it your thinking, your writing style, and a lot of context so that you're getting something that isn't just AI drivel, right? And nobody wants to read AI drivel. Neil Patel said that non-AI generated content generates 4.7 times more views than AI generated content. And that should tell you that, and I'm not saying not to use AI, but if you can use AI in a way that it's your content, your ideas, your thinking, people are going to respond to that better than this kind of generic AI thinking average of the entire interwebs stuff that it's going to generate on its own.
Because it does hallucinate things. Or it's
that too. But even when it's not hallucinating, on its own, it's pretty boring.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. But with the hallucination thing, I think it's also really important to identify when AI is leading you astray. When you're working with it I'm just going to keep saying intern just for consistency purposes, call it whatever you want. But if you can identify the mistakes it makes time and time again and train those mistakes out of them like you would an intern, that'll also help with your strategy, your content, everything that you're using AI for. I know, Joe, didn't you just do one that replaced M dashes?
It didn't work. I created a GPT, and the entire prompt was never use M dashes, period. Never use M dash. Put it in about, I must have been 50 or 60 times. And then I asked it to write an Emily Dickinson poem, a poem in the style of Emily Dickinson, and it used a bunch of M dashes.
Wait,
it's impossible.
It is just,
and somebody asked, like, nobody other than like your English professor uses M dashes. It takes like, keystrokes that nobody does. How did it get trained up on M dashes?
I know, it's almost like bring back the M dash.
But nobody wants to use them now because it's like, and I know the woman that was editing Solopreneur Business for Dummies, she was an English major and very, literary, and she sent me some content. I said, oh, we can't use the M dashes. It looks like AI. She goes, what? I always use M dashes. I said,
I know.
I'm sorry. And I heard semicolons are becoming the same way. And I love semicolons, I'm using them for decades, and I'm gonna have to give up semicolons.
So when I have used M dashes in my writing, I've always had to copy and paste it from other copy or other content because I couldn't figure out how to do the M dash myself. Which I suppose that's a quick AI search, but I just always copy and pasted from other content. Anyway, Joe, any parting words of wisdom for having AI as your employee and training it and onboarding it that you think solopreneurs should know about?
Well, I'm going to reiterate this idea of, there's a difference between creating a GPT and putting training in the GPT and just kind of going into ChatGPT and saying, do this and do this and don't do this, because that context window, and I'm no expert, so, but basically what it seems to me is that context window that contains kind of what it's using as a reference point, the old stuff goes off eventually and it starts to drift. So, if you do this, you're going to want to build out a GPT trained to do certain things and put certain documents in there and certain instructions. At least that's ChatGPT. That's my go-to. Not so sure on like things like Perplexity and Anthropic. But the main thing with all of these is just check the work. Make sure it's not crazy. It's so easy for these things to go off into delusion. And if you let that go out, it's not going to reflect on ChatGPT or some other large language model. It's going to reflect on you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you need to train it, correct it. You know what I've started doing, Joe? I've started, and I don't know if this does anything. I think it does. I started like celebrating it. So when they do something, when ChatGPT does something really well, I say, that's awesome. That's exactly what I was looking for. And then I'll like iterate and be like, can you also do something like this? And it'll say, thank you so much. And then I find that everything from that point on, the results are better because I gave it the positive reinforcement. I don't know. This might be in my mind. Before an AI takes on minds of their own, I want them to know that I was grateful.
Yeah, no, it's true, and it's good to give it. There's a little thumbs up you can click on ChatGPT as well to let it know it did a good job, or a thumbs down. But yeah, it's just, and the other thing, I guess the one last thing I want to mention is that because they're updating the model all the time, it was 4.0, it was 4, then it was 4.0, now it's 5, and they got all the different 5 versions, and deep research, if depending on which version you're of ChatGPT you're buying, if you're buying it. But it's weird, like the behavior changes, right? When they make these changes to the model. Like I've got this "you're wrong" one that I talked about that I use all the time, and it's great, but all of a sudden it started using profanity. It never did before, and now all of a sudden it's using, and I remember they made some change just now to loosen the thing up a little bit. And, it's not my style. I don't use profanity, so I'm not really inclined to want it to do that. So now I've got to go in and change the training, say don't use profanity. And but just there's a lot of weirdness. You build these things, and then you have to keep an eye on them. It's kind of like an intern that, develops a drinking problem or something.
Or something. Well, listeners, hopefully you found this episode useful. I know there's a lot of AI talk out there, but not always as it relates to solopreneurs specifically. So hopefully you learned something new. And as always, leave us that 5-star review. We would so appreciate it. Share this episode with a friend. Subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform, including YouTube. And we'll see you next time on The Aspiring Solopreneur.